I like war. I read a lot about history, and yeah, well, it's neat to read about the rise of empires and how different groups interact. Nothing fills me with more joy than reading about people killing themselves by the millions over increasingly petty squabbles. Of course, I'm just joking, nothing amuses me anymore, but today I would like to talk about one moment in history where the United States and Britain almost began to kill each other because of a shot pig. This is the story of the Pig War. It's a lot like the Bay of Pigs, except it didn't involve Cuba, communism, the 20th century. Okay, the more I think about it, it was actually nothing like the Pig War. There were two similarities, though. It involved the United States, and it involved a formerly Spanish island. This one, to be exact, San Juan Island. And although it was discovered by Spain, they didn't have the ability to claim them, because although North Americans may be obese, the Spanish Empire was inflated. Thank you, this is the closest thing I have to an actual town. I am a fucking hack. Good night. The islands were part of the much larger Oregon country, however, and they were fought over by the United States and Britain. More specifically, the British that love eating tree saps so much they made a flag out of it, and once committed what I think classifies as a hate crime against me because they lost a hockey game against the Flyers. Where was I? Ah, right. The US and Britain were in a really heated argument over who would control the Oregon country, probably because somebody told them how much organs actually sell for. The conflict didn't really ramp up though until the newly elected American president James K. Polk started telling everyone that he would literally fight the British if they were not given the entirety of the Oregon country. Oh, and quick side note, just in case you went to high school in the US or remember hearing through a deep haze of unit circles and fingertips being stung by pencil lead the slogan 54, 40 or fight in your history class, this is what that was talking about. Polk didn't get his war, nor did he get the entirety of Oregon, but it did convince Britain enough to sign a treaty with the US to establish a border so there wouldn't be any future conflict. At least in the north. Mexico was about to get fucked. However, thanks to the Treaty of Paris... No, the other Treaty of Paris. How many treaties of Paris were there? Oh, Jesus Christ! Thanks to the treaty that ended the Revolutionary War, there was already a well-established border between the United States and Canada. That was the 49th parallel. Unfortunately, though, it wouldn't be that simple, because if the border went along the entire 49th parallel, it would have cut straight through Vancouver Island, which the British wouldn't allow since they already established some trading ports there. Furthermore, I wouldn't allow it because in terms of border gore, it's comparable to Unit 731. It was obvious that the border was going to have to swoop around the island somehow, and according to the treaty, this is the final agreement that they reached. The border will go to the middle of the channel which separates the continent from Vancouver's island, and thus southerly through the middle of said channel and out into the Pacific Ocean, provided that blah 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 blah, something about trade. Do you like my British accent, by the way? Yeah, I like to think of it as a talent, considering how I'm able to cover all the different dialects of the British Isles while simultaneously sounding like none of them. So, anyway, they were expecting the border to go through this strait here and out into the Pacific, but upon further inspection, they realized that there were actually islands in that strait. So, actually, there were two straits separating the continent from Vancouver, but the treaty never specified which one. So, naturally, the US claimed it was the Rosario Strait, which was closer to them, and the British claimed it was the Haro Strait, which was closer to them. Thus leaving us with this amazing geographic anomaly where we have these islands in between Canada and the US that remain unclaimed to this day. Nah, I'm just fucking with you. Of course they both claim the islands. However, the British were too busy expanding their empire into the rest of the world, and the US was getting ready to kill itself, so this time they really couldn't care about the border dispute. So, just like every other great power throughout history, the two countries decided it would be best if they just kicked the problem down the road and agreed to a joint occupation of the island. What is a joint occupation? Well, think of it like this. Say a country wants to claim some territory. Just saying that they own the territory isn't enough. In order to rule over territory, you need people who are willing to listen to your rules in the first place. So, the countries would allow both American and British settlers to come to the island and sort it out for themselves. That way, when the question of who owned the islands came back up, it would practically already be decided. The benefits are obvious. The US and Britain don't have to take time out of their busy schedules to sort it out for themselves. They get to partially reap the benefits from the islands for some period of time, even if they lose them, and it absolutely, certainly, without question or doubt, probably won't lead to war. Well, as it turns out, apparently leaving both American and British settlers on a small island with the possibility of either of their countries taking the island for themselves and kicking all the people off their land turned out to work just fine, actually. That is, until the summer of 1859, when an American farmer by the name of Lyman Cutler caught a pig eating his potatoes. Being an American, Lyman was understandably upset to see a pig romping around his private property eating his french fry plants, so, understandably, he took his gun and immediately shot it. Unfortunately for Cutler, though, that pig just so happened to belong to an Irish settler by the name of Charles Griffin, and, I love to make a joke here, but I can't think of a single connection between Irish people and potatoes. What a shame. Anyway, fighting quickly erupted between the two farmers as Griffin demanded Cutler pay in reparations for his killed pig. There was a disagreement over how much the pig was worth, and Cutler ultimately refused to pay at all. I mean, honestly now, what was Griffin gonna do? Call the police? So, after all the Americans were kicked off the island by the British authorities, they sought help from the American military, more specifically the one stationed in Oregon at the time. This army was under the command of Brigadier General William S. Harney, who had an Irish last name and matching hatred of the English. Immediately, he sent out 64 soldiers under the command of George E. Pickett to take back control of the island. And if that name happens to sound familiar to you, by the way, that was the same Pickett who led Pickett's charge, in which he lost 70% of his men. So that's comforting. Well, either way, the Americans were quickly able to take back their land, and everyone was happy. Except for the British. And I suppose the governor of Vancouver, too. Actually, especially the governor, because he was so angry, he immediately sent 3 warships to try and scare Pickett off the island. Pickett didn't retreat, though, and in fact, he was reinforced. So in response, the British reinforced themselves as well. The two sides kept this up for several weeks until the news finally reached Washington and London, at which point the heads of state likely both freaked the fuck out. The American president at the time, who was now James Buchanan, took time out of his busy schedule, making us wait another 4 years for Lincoln so he could send out Winfield Scott to do some negotiations. Winfield Scott was a well-known American war hero and quite a good negotiator. He had already helped resolve 2 border disputes before, so this was probably a cakewalk for him. Then again, judging by his stature, most things were probably a cakewalk for him. Get it? Because he's fat. Look, I just want to go to bed. Well, whatever he did, it clearly worked because he managed to make the British agree to hold the islands under a joint military occupation, which feels like a reasonable judgment to me. I mean, if a soldier were to shoot a pig, his drill sergeant would probably beat him to death with a corpse. Well, thanks to Scott, the crisis was finally solved and the US was able to go out of it, beaming with confidence to kill itself in the most brutal war in American history. The islands would be held under joint military occupation for another 12 years, at which point they realized that this whole ordeal has been going on for way too long and they should probably try to get it sorted out. At this point, though, they realized that they weren't going to be able to fix the problem by themselves, so they decided to hand it out to some other country to do it for them. Well, why not that new country? Germany! Someone probably said in a drunken stupor after reading the label off their beer bottle, I'm certain they'd have no biases at all. Apparently everyone was okay with this idea, though, and they decided to hand it over to Germany to figure out who should take control of the islands. The Germans spent a lot of time trying to figure out who the island should belong to, looking into claims, looking at the rivers, and then they looked across the ocean and saw that Britain was way closer and they probably should just give the islands to the United States. And so, in a very shocking turn of events, the Germans decided not to give free land over to the British, and the United States were now the official owners of the San Juan Islands. Shortly after hearing this, the American soldiers quickly ran up to the north of the island to hang up their flag on the British flagpole. However, once they got there, they realized that the British had actually cut it down. I'm not very well versed in British culture or mannerisms, so excuse me for making a guess here, but this was either an example of British cynicism or their hatred of Poles that don't want to work for them anymore. Well, despite all the conflict in the past, the United States and the United Kingdom get along just famously today. Today, San Juan Island is primarily used for tourism now, under the watchful eye of the National Park Service. Up in the north of the island, you can find where the English had camped out during the dispute, called English Camp. What's interesting about this point is that it's one of the few places in the United States where the United States government regularly raises the flag of a foreign power over government territory. The United States and Canada have the largest unguarded border in the entire world, and maybe as you leave San Juan Island and pass through Griffin Bay, I don't know if they're related, it would be cool if they were, maybe, just for a second, you could think about how hard I am reaching to try and figure out a good way to close this video. Oh my god, I am tired.
She's been dancing in a topless bar.